Well, all right. All right. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class, Parsha Beha'alot'cha. Parsha Beha'alot'cha is a beautiful Parsha with a lot of different topics, and they really span the gamut of Jewish philosophy and Jewish thought and Jewish history. We've got the inauguration. First of all, we have the menorah and the inauguration of the Levium, the discussion with between Moshe and his father-in-law about whether he should stay or not, or whether he should leave, and we have as well. We have the beginnings of the Jewish travels and the mistakes and the complaints about the monn and Moshe and Moshe's siblings speaking lashon hara about him. A lot of different topics. I've quoted before. I've heard it said in the name of Rav Soloveitchik that he loved this parsha because he feels like a honeybee pollinating for different flowers, going jumping from flower to flower. So many different topics, so much to say. So let's, without any further ado, we'll see that there's actually quite a few topics related to food in this parsha as well, and that is our focus this year as we wind up towards the end of our journey of Taam Dagan with Parshat Beha'alot'cha. Okay, let's start with the lighting of the menorah. Now, what does the lighting of the menorah have to do with food? I'm glad you asked. Chapter 8, verse 2. The bear El Aaron, Moshe is told to speak to Aaron. Ve'amarta, he loves, say to him, Ba'alotcha et hanerot. When you go up to light the nerot, El mul pnei hamenorah, at the face of the menorah, Ya'iru shivat hanerot. The seven lamps are supposed to give light to the front of the lamp. So somehow they're all bent towards the middle of it. That's kind of how it's understood. Um, 1 second. This probably doesn't make sense to call it a candlestick, but let's call it a lamp. Be a little more consistent. The menorah illuminates the table. There's an argument of what exactly it is that it's the Ya'iru Shivat Hanerot. What is it that these seven candles, the seven lights are illuminating? So there's an opinion that they light the candles, that they light the menorah that's in front of them. The Rashbam, who's quoted by the Znaim Torah, says that it's talking about the shulchan that is being illuminated by the menorah. Why? Because Torah, which is represented by the menorah, should inform our eating, which is represented by the shulchan. Here we have food. In other words, Torah and the ethical, moral lessons, all the things we've been learning in Taam Dagan, all of that is intentional. The Torah should teach us how to eat and what to eat and what to do before we eat and why we eat and all of that. All of the rules, everything that we've been talking about in terms of health and in terms of not overeating and in terms of all of the different philosophies regarding food, all of that is those working people who provide for the needs of those scholars. There's an opinion like that in the Sforno based on the Gemara in Shabbat 63a. The two sides must recognize their unity of purpose in serving Hashem, since without the leaves, in other words, without the working people, the grape clusters, in other words, Torah scholars would not survive. That's a quote from the Gemara in Chulin 92a. And that's the idea, again, also relating to food and our occupations and why we work in order to support Torah scholars as well as part of our income as well. Next, when the Jewish people uh, then their firstborns are given instead of their firstborn. The Levium have a job to do, and there's an interesting point there, and it says, "Ki nitunim nitunim hema li." Hashem says they are given to me, mitoch bnei Israel, from amongst the bnei Israel. Um, from Tachat Pitrat Kol Rechem Bechor Kol, Mibnei Yisrael lakachta otam li. Instead of all that opened the womb, or instead of the firstborn, even the firstborn of all the children of Israel have I taken them to me. This is, but this phrase, this word nitunim is said twice. It's not by accident. It's not the Torah stuttering or anything like that. There's a reason for this 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 phrase. And so the commentary, let's see who says this, the Sforno, okay, there you go, says that the verse repeats in the Tunim because the second time refers to the tithes, the Maaser, with which the Bnei Israel are required to provide the food and support for the Levium. So that's so again, there's a because that's part of them being separate, and part of them having a job is that they're going to get paid for it. How do they get paid for it? How do the Levium support themselves and survive? What do they eat? Right. So they eat the food that they're able to afford with the maser that the other Jewish people give them. So now we're going to skip two whole chapters to chapter 10, verse 30, and get to the conversation of Yitro and Moshe, Moshe's father-in-law, who is about to leave, and Moshe's trying to convince him to stay. And believe it or not, here too we will have some discussion about food. Vayomer Elav. So after Moshe tries to convince him, his father-in-law, who here is being called Chovev, by the way, responds with Vayomer Elav Lo Ilech. No, I'm not going to go. Ki em el artzi ve'el moladati ilech. I'm going to go to my own land and to my moladati, to my relatives. Can you give me just 1 second? I'm sorry. All right, back to this. Okay, do you hear me? I think you do. Okay, so that's what he says, and so Yitro is concerned with. So there's a whole discussion. Why isn't he going? In fact, the Orachaim and the Sforno both point out that it might be a chil Hashem for him not to go with them, which is probably why Moshe tries so hard to convince him to go. It's not clear whether he actually succeeded in convincing him or not. There's a machloket whether he listened to the actual debate is ironically we don't have the conclusion of it, so we don't know if he actually came along with the Jewish people or not. But certainly he must have had a reason to not go, and indeed, according to Sforno, he did. Yitro was concerned to travel with Bnei Israel to the land of Israel, lest his old age not allow him to handle the new land's climate and food. Remember, he is old. Like Moshe is old. This is his father-in-law. Okay, so he's a very very elderly man, and we have to be concerned about our health. We have a responsibility to eat well and to be active and to do the things we need to do to stay healthy, and to and where we live, we can be affected by climate and food. I know people who live their whole lives in Israel and cannot eat the food outside of Israel. I know people who got sick while they were in Israel and had to come back to America or other places because the food just it didn't agree with them. It's there's a climatic the climate has an effect on the food and has an effect on the body, and we have to keep that in mind as we progress and age. Chapter 11, verse 4. And again, also, an important part of that is that as we age, we become less adaptable to new environments and new foods. And we have to keep that in mind. It's a good idea, by the way, just advice. It's a good idea as this process is continuing, as you're younger, to acculturate yourself with as many different things as possible. Obviously, kosher things, but so that you'll have the variety you need in your diet to regardless of where you live. All right, now we're going to talk about probably the main bulk of the food-related topic in this parsha is the complaints regarding meat and lack of food and the monn that is stirred up by the Eruv Rav, by this mixed multitude of Egyptian semi-converts who came along with the Jews from Egypt. So we have in chapter 11, verse 4, the beginning of it. The V'hasafseif asher b'kibo hit'avu tava. And this mixed multitude that was among them began to have tava, to have desire, lust. V'yashuvu yivku, and they cried, and Gam b'nei Israel, even the Jewish people cried. V'yamru mi yachilenu basar, who's going to feed us? If only we could eat meat. Meat? What's going on here? Why are we talking about meat? So the Taam Dagan explains the Eruv Rav are complaining about a lack of meat to eat, while they still have plenty. That's one opinion. That's the opinion of Rashi. They still have meat. There's plenty of animals. Right? They're traveling with animals, so they could eat meat. What's the problem? Or because not everybody had some. In other words, some people had, but not everybody. And so that's an opinion of the Ramban. That's the reason they were complaining. Either way, it could be that their desire began as a natural desire, but changed. One second. No. Excuse me. It's working. Changed to unnatural desire because they were filled with what their natural physical impulses led them to. This is a discussion that the Ramban has in Sefer Devarim, where he explains that we all have normal, natural human desires, and if we overfulfill them, and we'll have an opening, and we might explore other impulses that we don't naturally have, but then we'll begin to have them and consider them natural as well. This is also based on the Rambam, Isuri Bia. There's more to say about that there. But here we're talking about these are natural desires. They want meat. That's normal. They wanted whatever. We'll see that there's different opinions, but what exactly they wanted. But even if they just wanted meat, that became more than just a regular desire because they had already enough meat. They may just want the feeling of real meat rather than the nutritional content of meat that the monn already provided. Right, so maybe they have what they can get out of meat, but they want to feel, right. They want to, the actual texture of meat is what they're lacking, because monn does not feel like meat. Since the monn does not provide the same physical enjoyment that regular food provides, the Jews are concerned that they are not on the required spiritual level to live on such spiritual food. They're about to go into Israel, and they're going to have to live like that for the rest of their lives. No, 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 sir. They had good reason to complain, therefore. Furthermore, it would be a good idea to get their bodies used to normal food before entering the land of Israel. In order to test Hashem, they created within themselves an unnatural desire like that of eating spoiled food. This is, again, the Ramban. See there for more. Next verse, chapter 11, verse 5, literally the next verse, where they continue their complaint, and they say, Zacharnu, we remember et hadaga, they remember the fish. Asher nochal b'Mitzrayim, that we ate in Mitzrayim, chinam, for free, et hakshuim, the cucumbers, vet havatchim, and the melons, vet hachatzer, vet habitzalim, the leeks and the onion, vet hashumim, and the garlics. Well, we remember all these things, and this is what we miss. While they were working for Paro, he ordered that they should be allowed to eat fish from fishermen and vegetables from his citizens' gardens, as kings often decree from their people for the sake of getting the best work from their workers. All right, so this is the comment of the Ramban. on Shemot, that's something that happened. So when they say they missed the fish and the melons and everything else that they used to eat for free, they literally ate those things for free. They were provided them by the government to keep working. Well, that's what they're missing right now. The fish they got in Mitzrayim was also free in the sense that they did not have any commandments obligating them regarding the food. It was chinam in that sense, says Rashi, and did not even need to say blessings before and after eating them. Says who? Says it? That's from the Zohar. They wanted to behave as freely as the fish and animals do in their relationships as well, and there's quite a bit to say about that. The Kli Yakar has a lot on that in chapter 11, verse 4. In the previous verse, he talks about how that's where they complained about the fish that they had for free. They like acting like fish. They're populating like fish and not having any rules like fish and etc. Acting like animals, basically. The people mention these vegetables, these particular vegetables, should say, right, the leeks and the melons and the cucumbers, because they are considered unhealthy for nursing mothers. Says the Sifrei, the Midrash says this. And the monn did not turn into harmful foods, because like a father, Hashem does not want us to eat what is bad for us. Since these foods can be harmful, it is not the lack of nutrition that the Jews are complaining about. What they feel they lack is variety, which is also important for health. Right? There's something to the fact that we need a certain degree of variety in our diet. And that's what Rav Hirsch talks about, that they didn't have that. The story is told, and in the Tzur Hamor, that when Rabbeinu Meshulam was a court physician to an Arab king, the king criticized the Jews of the generation of the Midbar for being ungrateful. After all, they had all their needs satisfied miraculously, and yet complained for some cucumbers and melons. Rabbeinu Meshulam then asked the royal chef to withhold the king's beloved garlic from the next dish as a way to protect his health. As the king was eating the dish, he becomes violently incensed when he notices. One second. Violently incensed when he notices that there is no garlic. When the chef points out that he was following the medical advice of the king's royal doctor, the king demanded an explanation from Rabbeinu Meshulam. The latter then explained that the king became violent after missing but one ingredient. Imagine eating the same food for 40 years. So that's how he explained why the Jews complain. Quote here from a large quote here from Rebecca Rupp's How Carrots Won the Trojan War. A little historical background here from just a moment. The ancient Egyptians supposedly ate cucumbers at every meal, dipped in bowls of brine, and used them to make a questionable drink called cucumber water. To do this, a hole was cut in a ripe cucumber, the inside stirred with a small stick, the hole plugged, and the cucumber then buried in the ground for several days. When unearthed, boasts an ancient recipe, the pulp will be found converted into an agreeable liquid. Nonetheless, not everyone liked cucumbers, and some thought them downright dangerous, which is interesting because Chazal say the same thing. Charles Estienne and Jean Lebolt's L'Agriculture et Maçon Rustique, translated in 1616 into English as The Country Farm, warns starkly that the use of cucumbers is altogether hurtful, and contemporary medical authorities caution that cucumbers filled the body with, quote, cold, knotty humors, and brought on ague. If not fatal, they were nondescript. A quote from the biblical Apocrypha states, a scarecrow in the garden of cucumbers keeps nothing. In other words, guards nothing, right? So, in other words, a garden of cucumbers is nothing, which certainly implies that the cucumber was not the top crop on the Middle Eastern bloc. Nutritionally, that nothing is literal. The average cucumber, like the average jellyfish, is 96% water and contains little else other than a smidgen of vitamin A and B, 1% and 2% of the recommended daily allowance, respectively, all in the peel. At that rate, in terms of vitamin A, it takes 120 unpeeled cucumbers to equal 1 carrot. So, food historian Waverly Root describes the cucumber as, quote, as close to neutrality as a vegetable can get without ceasing to exist, end quote. Still, all the water gave the characteristically cool cucumber a banner reputation as a refreshing thirst quencher. Early caravans took them along as a sort of vegetable water bottle. Overheated Greeks smashed them and mixed the pulp with honey and snow to make an ancient version of sherbet. The Romans were enthusiastic about them, occasionally eaten raw, but more often boiled and served with oil, vinegar, and honey. The emperor Tiberius was mad for them, consuming, according to Pliny the Elder, 10 a day, every day. To indulge his autocratic whims, Roman gardeners began growing cucumbers in earth-filled carts, which they trundled about from spot to spot to make the most of the sun. All right. Anyway, that's a little bit about the cucumber. So we see there is some there's some consistency in how Chazal thought of the cucumbers and how the Torah seems to think about them, and how ancient peoples of other cultures thought about them as well. All right, and now says chapter 11, verse 6. They continue their complaint and they say, "V'ata nafshenu yivesha ein kol bilti et haman einenu." Says, now our soul is dried up, and there's nothing at all. We have nothing except this monn to look to. So it's interesting that they mention looking all of a sudden, as if the sight of the monn, the vision of the monn, is an important aspect. We'll see what that has to do with our verse as well. They complain about dryness, right? Our soul is dried up because food waters the soul by moistening the body, says the Ramban. And by the way, he was a doctor, so this is actual medical theory from 1,000 years ago. Um, since the monn could taste like any food they desire, the emphasis on not seeing anything but monn hints to the sage's statement that when a blind person eats, that person is never satisfied. Consuming monn, they could have intent to be eating anything, but not seeing the presentation of their food, they felt lacking. In other words, part of the satisfaction we receive from eating food is the presentation. And this is one reason restaurants are generally judged by their atmosphere and decor, together with the final competent creating of their culinary product. In other words, the food. Chapter 8, chapter 11, verse 8. Shatu ha'am v'laktu v'tachanu merechaim. So now the Torah is describing how the Jews actually. It's going fast. Oh my gosh. I was at 65% on my computer. Now I'm at like 9% suddenly. Okay, I gotta plug this in. Give me just a quick moment. All right. So the Torah is describing how the Jewish people actually used the monn, or how it was produced. So it says, "Shatu ha'am v'laktu v'tachanu berechaim." They went around and gathered it and ground it in mills. And yeah, whew, Baruch Hashem. All right, thank you. I have a competent team of assistants here. The cat doesn't count. All right, so okay, so they found it and ground it and pounded it into coarse flakes. All right. Oh, dachu lemadocha, or they baked it, or they ground it in mills. So they ground it in mills.
Yes.
Tachna b'chaim, or dacha b'madocha, or they beat it in mortars. Vishlu b'parur. They cooked it in pots. V'asu oto ugo. They made cakes out of it. V'haya tamo Ketam Lishad Hashemen, and the taste of it was like the taste of a cake that's cooked in shemen, in oil. Give me one quick second. So the Taam Dagan continues with commentary. They ground it in fine or pounded it into. They ground it fine or pound it into coarse flakes. They eat it cooked or baked. The various ways of preparing the monn for consumption ensured that it was not lacking in variety. And again, that's the different textures. It's the same food, and it can taste like whatever you want. So if you can change the texture, and that's what they did, they were pounding it, they were frying it, they were changing how it felt in their mouths, which is an important part of eating. We do that. Hashem on purpose created different foods, different varieties of textures. Um, there's there's foods that are crunchy like apples, and foods that are soft like banana, not too soft. But we appreciate that. We like that. We want that. We don't want all of our food to have the same kind of mushiness or the same kind of hardness either, for that matter. That's an aspect of how we enjoy our foods, the variety of its texture. Chapter 11, verse 10, then. V'shama Moshe es ha'am. Moshe heard the people. They were, of course, what were they doing? Bocha lemishpachotav. They were they were weeping by their families, family by family. Each family seemed to be crying. Ish lepetach ahalo. Each man in front of his tent. V'yichar af Hashem ma'od. And then Hashem became very angry. Doesn't really seem like a good reason to become angry, but we'll see that there's more going on than that. V'nei Moshe ra, and in the eyes of Moshe, this was bad. So what's going on here, and this is not entirely food related, but the complaint over food restrictions is really a pretext, according to some, or according to some, a euphemism really for the sexual restrictions in Jewish law. So that's why it says, this is Rashi. This is why it says, what were they crying? Lemishpachotav. They were crying about their families. They were crying. The people who were upset that they have a society that requires or that demands of them really a this kind of family. They were interested in having alternatives that the Torah does not allow, and that's why they were crying. And that's what really this whole thing about food is really about. It's not just about food. It's about, and we said this before also in the context of the fish, that they wanted to act animalistic, that they wanted to do what they want. They didn't want any kinds of restrictions. So either that's a pretext or a euphemism for other things as well. And so Hashem says, okay, you want meat? I'll give you meat, sort of. I'll give you quail, right, which is a kind of bird. And in chapter 11, verse 19, he goes into detail. Lo yom echa tochlun. You're not going to eat it for one day. Lo yomayim, and not 2 days. V'lo chamisha yamim, and not 5 days. V'lo asara yamim, and not 10 days. V'lo esrim yom, and not 20 days. There's a lot easier ways to say it. If this verse is saying that you're going to eat it for a long time, there are lots of different ways that Hashem could have said that. So why are these exact numbers? It's 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, 20 days. What's going on here? So says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh that some people can satisfy their desire for meat after eating meat for 1 day. One meat meal, I'm good. I don't need to eat meat for a long time. Others might need more time on a diet of meat before they have satisfied their desire. Hashem in His Torah is warning that even people who normally can satisfy their craving after a single day will not be allowed to do so. They will have to keep eating meat. This is a command. They have to eat this meat, whether they want to or not. They're not going to be able to eat anything else. Similarly, people who would normally require 10 days to satisfy their craving would not be allowed to do so. The normal manner in which these people satisfy their craving would not apply this time. The limit the Torah prescribes is 30 days, at which time the meat would become disgusting. This teaches that if someone stopped eating meat before these 30 days elapse would be violating a positive command. So that's the Orach Chaim's understanding of why we have these examples. Chapter 11, verse 20. Ad chol shamim, like I said, for a whole month, 30 days, ad asher yetze be'apchem, until it comes out of your nose, until it comes out of your nostrils. Vayalachem lazara, and it's going to be gross to you. Yan ki ma'astem et Hashem asher b'kir bechem, because you've rejected Hashem who is among you. V'tivku lefanav lemor, lama zeh yatzana mimitzrayim. And you had the indecency you to cry and trouble him and bother him and say, why did we come out of Egypt? Why did we come out of Mitzrayim? Second, why did we come out of Mitzrayim? They want the variety of food they had in Mitzrayim, not just monn, says the Sforno. They will end up eating the meat to a point of such oversatiation that they will become sick. Also the Sforno, elsewhere. Now, all this talk about variety and having a diet of various foods is actually very important for health. And so I thought this would be a good place to insert a little something from Bill Bryson's book, The Body. He says there, it is easy to make risk sound scary. It is often written that eating a daily helping of processed meat increases your risk of colorectal cancer by 18%, which is doubtless true. But as Julia Bellas of Vox has pointed out, a person's lifetime risk of colorectal cancer is about 5%, and eating processed meat every day appears to boost a person's absolute risk of cancer by 1 percentage point to 6%. That's 18% of the 5% lifetime risk. So put another way, if 100 people eat a hot dog or bacon sandwich every day, over the course of a lifetime, one of them will get colorectal cancer, in addition to the 5 who would have gotten it anyway. That's not a risk you want to take, but it's not a death sentence. It is important to distinguish between probability and destiny. Just because you are obese or a smoker or couch potato doesn't mean you are doomed to die before your time, or that if you follow an ascetic regimen, you will avoid peril. Roughly 40% of people with diabetes, chronic hypertension, or cardiovascular disease were fit as a fiddle before they got ill. And roughly 20% of them, 26% of people who are severely overweight live to a ripe old age without ever doing anything about it. Just because you exercise regularly and eat a lot of salad doesn't mean you have bought yourself a better lifespan. What you have bought is a better chance of having a better lifespan. So many variables have been implicated in heart health, exercise and lifestyle, consumption of salt, alcohol, sugar, cholesterol, trans fats, saturated fats, unsaturated fats, and so on, that it is almost certainly a mistake to pin the blame decisively on any one component. A heart attack, as one doctor has put it, is 50% genetic and a 50% cheeseburger. That exaggerates matters, of course, but the underlying point is valid. The most prudent option, it seems, is to have a balanced and moderate diet. A sensible approach is, in short, the sensible approach. So all this talk about variety, now you see that it's an important thing. That's what creates, that Hashem created the world in such a way that all these textures that we crave, all these different visions, the colors and everything else, the presentations of the food that we're looking for, all of that creates the ability for us to have this balanced and moderate diet that we need. Okay, chapter 11, verse 21. Moshe said, Sheish ma'ot elef ragli. I've got here 600,000 men on foot. Ha'am asher anochi bikirbo. And I'm amongst them. Ata amarta basar etein lahem. And I'm supposed to, and you're telling me to bring them food. Achlu chodesh yamim. They're going to eat for a whole month. So Moshe's statement regarding fish, as we'll see, he's going to speak about fish in the next verse. um, as an alternative to supplying meat was not meant as a question, but as a comment that such an alternative, not involving ritual killing of the fish, which would not require priests, would also have presented great difficulties, albeit miracles of a different kind. The people who would never have collected enough, the people could never have collected enough fish in a day to last them for a month. Hashem's answer to Moshe was simply that he would provide birds with which do not require ritual slaughter by priests, as did cattle or flocks, right? Because remember, while they were in the midbar, only Kohanim did usually only Kohanim did the shechita, and because shechita was primarily for zvachim, for animal offerings. They didn't really eat meat that weren't for animal offerings, and so except for these birds and chayot, which are wild animals, those could be eaten without the use of a kohen. Next verse, chapter 11, verse 22. As promised, Hatona vakar yishachet lahem. Flocks and animals are shechted, slaughtered for them. Umatza lahem, and will that be enough for them? Im et kol dagei hayam yesef lahem yimatza lahem. If all the fish of the sea is gathered together for them, that will that be enough? This isn't that's not going to be enough animals for what they can do. Now Moshe is not asking a rhetorical question. Rather, the hey hatemiha, which is with hatson vakar, right? It makes it a declarative statement that Moshe is arguing that just slaughtering the cattle will be enough for the complaining people. This is because knowing one has food adds to some satisfaction. As the sages teach, there's no comparison between a person with bread in one's basket and a person without. The alternative would be to remove their appetite, and that would be contrary to the free will that Hashem wants within us to make the right decisions. That's from the Malbim. Moshe knows that at that time, any meat which is not slaughtered as a sacrifice is forbidden for the people to eat. This is Dat Zakanim. There are only a total of 3 Kohanim at the time. Available to slaughter the animals was required. We've got Aaron and his 2 sons. That's 3 Kohanim. Those are the only people doing the shechting. How could they slaughter enough animals in one day to satisfy the desires of all the people? And even if they could, And even if this could be done, seeing that there was a maximum of 2 days and a night during which the meat from a korban could be eaten, right? That's the rule of korbanot. How could they eat that meat for 30 days? They're only getting it once. So Moshe is certain that the Jewish people would reject the food as soon as they saw the huge amount of it, realizing that eating gluttonously was sinful, says the Malbim. The least anyone gathers turns out to be 10 chamorim, over 43,000 egg volume, proving that Moshe is wrong in this argument with Hashem. And then fish seems to take the place of meat here, right? Moshe is mentioning fish when the people want meat might lend support to an opinion of the sages that when people, in general, that when people say meat, they might be intending fish. There is such an idea, which actually brought down in halacha like that by the Rambam. And I leave this as a question. Perhaps this is the reason why Sephardim have a custom to not eat fish together with milk, as it says in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, chapter 11, verse 31. 2 more comments on this. Ruach nasa me'et Hashem. A wind came from Hashem. V'yagash salvim min hayam, and it brought the quail from the sea. V'yitosh al hamachane kederech yom ko, v'derech yom ko. And they spread over the camp a day's journey on one side, a day's journey on the other side. Sevivot hamachane, all around the camp. Uchamatayim al pnei haaretz, about 2 amot above the face of the earth. That's a 2 amot pile. An amot is about 2 feet. So we got 4 feet. They're covered in 4 feet of quail, right? Covering the entire camp, right? It's left and right. You can't see almost anything else. It's instead of a snowstorm, it's a quail storm. The people do not even need to exert themselves and bend down to grab hold of the quails. In response to the request for meat, Hashem sends quail because birds are a mixture of land and water, which is a lower form of or an older form of life. This is the Znaim LaTorah. Um, Hashem implies that just as it is within his power to provide what he had said he would provide, so it is in his power to see to it that they collect it until his word has become fulfilled. They felt a gluttonous craving to eat meat, and in addition, they lacked confidence in the assurance related to them by Moshe. Thus, the frenzied rush to gather the quails. Bear in mind that they had been assured that they would be able to enjoy meat for a whole month. So why are they like rushing about trying to get it all? Collect them all like Pokemon. Why are they in such a hurry to do all this? Because they're almost they're almost crazy for this meat. Last comment, it's a very short comment, but I think you'll find this interesting, at least halachically. Chapter 11, verse 33. Habasar odenu bein shnehem terem yikaret. While the meat was still in their teeth, while it was still being chewed, Av Hashem chara ba'am, Hashem's anger was kindled against the people. V'yach Hashem ba'am makeh rabba ma'od. And Hashem gave them a very great plague. And according to the Taz, this and also the Rambam, this is one of the sources for the idea of waiting 6 hours between meat and milk. And by the way, this is I don't know how to emphasize this more. This isn't actually meat. This is a bird. This is quail. This is a derabanan meat, right? It's not actual meat. It's only rabbinically is it considered meat, and part of waiting between meat and dairy is the idea that you have to like clean it out from your mouth. You have to clean it out from your teeth, and that comes from this verse. Okay, that's what I've got on Beha'alot'cha with from the Taam Dagan. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and Shabbat Shalom, and let's meet again next week for Parshat Shlach. Have a good night.